So my name is Mark Erickson. Welcome to the Utah Elixir Meetup. We normally meet monthly, and this is our first time live streaming, and we're excited to do it. We're excited to be able to see all of our friends who we would normally visit with in in our office space and be able to eat pizza and talk and get to know each other better. But today, you know, that in the current climate, we can't do that. So we're excited to be able to get together, see each other online in this way. And we're grateful that Evan decided he was scheduled to be our presenter for the last one that we had scheduled to meet physically. We weren't able to actually end up doing that physically because you know, we were just like all working from home, shutting down the office. And so Evan had still prepared his presentation, and we're grateful that he was able to still come on and share that with us tonight. So Evan, maybe you can give us a little bit of a background about what the topic is and then just take it away.
Yeah, so tonight I'm going to be talking to you guys about the Pow Authentication library for Elixir. This library was primarily built for people who were looking for an easy drop-in authentication system. A lot of the Elixir community has come from Ruby, as I'm sure we're all well aware of, and Ruby has a well-defined community around its gems, and one in particular called Devise. So a good fellow Elixir alchemist named Dan Schultzer, if I recall correctly, he created a library called Pow Auth, which is intended to be an Elixir take on solving the same problem that Devise solved, which is authentication. So let me go ahead and get my presentation pulled up. Now, I made the mistake of doing the entire presentation in Apple Keynote, and I regret that. So bear with me for a second. I'm going to share my screen, share that one, and then start. I hope you guys can see my presentation. Gonna say you can. The problem with Keynote is it actually then changes every single screen, so I can no longer see Jitsi and to see if it's properly sharing. So this is my presentation on PowAuth. I find the name kind of funny because it's like comic book Pow. So I went to one of those meme generators and generated this. Now, before we really get started too deep into this, this presentation is intended to be half presentation, half code along. So I'd encourage you guys when I get to the live demo of it to join in with me. It's a pretty easy start for Pow. So the documentation of Pow right off the bat says it gives you an out-of-the-box authentication and user management system, and it does exactly that. As I said before, it's similar to Devise, and what makes Pow super nice is that it has a bunch of extensions built into it for things like password reset email functionality and invitation functionality and various different things that are not included necessarily in the base library, but are extensions that you can easily include to give your app that functionality. So it's not just a one thing. It can fit in many different situations. So another thing that makes Pow different from some other solutions is Dan has spent a lot of time making sure that Pow is as secure as possible. And with this, he has based all of the practices based on NIST and OWASP to guide the development to make sure that it's not giving potential vulnerabilities out to people who don't necessarily know how to patch such vulnerabilities. I actually was talking to Dan over a pull request 6 months ago or so, trying to figure out how to do one particular thing, and he actually encouraged that we don't do it because it was against OWASP standards, which, in reflection, I'm glad we didn't go that route, because I have now since learned a lot more about authentication and how to keep our users and our own systems secure. Um, so as I was saying earlier, some of the extensions, these ones are built into the base library of POW. They are fairly easy to get started. Though we're not going to be actually using any of these extensions during the live demonstration, um, they only take an extra 5 or 10 minutes to really get going. Notable ones are the email confirmation and password reset, which both hook into uh, libraries like Bamboo Email, which allow you to very easily get some emails sent out. And Bamboo connects with all sorts of different products to handle email systems. So POW does have some good extensions that come with it. So what can't POW do? So this is where my initial study of POW started to show me some flaws and or pitfalls when it comes to POW. So some things that are with POW is files are hidden by default, meaning you can't initially see the templates for the login and registration. For example, you can't initially see the controllers or anything like that. It's all hidden uh, behind POW. And now this was intentionally done by Dan to help keep the clutter out of the developer's view that they don't necessarily need, but to assist in customization. Though everything is hidden, everything can be brought forward using some generators that will bring the files back to the forefront. Another thing that I found, though the documentation is robust in very specific functions and things, its guide on how to really get going in POW and how to customize certain things is still incomplete. It's still getting there, which honestly is all libraries. POW is still fairly new on the scene. Um, the next one that I found difficult was I had started an application. Live View was then introduced, and I decided to start playing with Live View in this application, and quickly discovered that POW uh, it does not play well initially with Live View. Some of the changes, some of the reasons why it was difficult was just handling sessions and how sessions should be handled over WebSockets. It was not in the original design or structuring of POW, so it was not clear or very easy to understand how to get a session handled proper with Live View. Though with Phoenix 1.5 and Live View now being baked into Phoenix, Dan has given a bit of a commitment to better support Live View in the near future. We've not seen. I've been monitoring a little bit, and I've not seen any pull requests quite yet for it. However, there are two different issues on the POW GitHub that have some solutions for the meantime until something can be better put in place for that. And then other things, some of the extensions and some of the things that you can do with POW, to me at least, seemed like they should have been included in the base package. But other people disagree. So that one's more of a matter of opinion. So there's really not a lot to POW past what I've said so far. It's a pretty easy library to get going, and to prove it, we're going to see it in action. Do I have any questions before I really start digging into this, though? This is intended to be a bit of an open forum. I don't want to be speaking to you. I'd like to speak as a group. If we don't have anything, then I can we can just move on with the demonstration. As I said, I would encourage you guys to follow along because POW is pretty easy. I hope you can still see my screen. I accidentally just canceled it, I think.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I'd encourage you guys to follow along. What I have in front of you guys right now is nothing more than a Phoenix app that is just newly generated. With the exception of this line, I have done nothing but just fetch the dependencies. So if you want to follow along, it's pretty easy. It's just mix phoenix.new. I chose to go with Pow demo. So let's go ahead and we can uncomment that. Down here, we're going to do Phoenix mix deps.get just to make sure we have everything. Just to make sure nothing blew up in my face for this live coding, I actually pulled all of the dependencies, including POW, earlier. But all right, so now that we have POW and everything fetched, we're going to go ahead and we need to start by doing a POW install. So POW includes a mix command, so we can do mix pow.install. What this is going to do is this is going to include a handful of things that POW needs to start. It's also going to generate all of the different files for your application, as well as the migrations for it. And once this gets done, we're going to run migrate just to be sure everything's done. And please feel free to stop me at any time if you guys have any questions. Happy to stop and do that.
Are you able to zoom in on the code?
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
There's a couple comments on the YouTube.
I was just about to say, I've not checked YouTube. I had horrible reverb when I was playing around with, when Mark and I were testing this. Let me go ahead and pull up YouTube so I can help monitor that. Sorry about that, Juan. Yeah, I zoomed in a little bit more. Is that good? I know we have a little bit of a delay, so I'm going to give them a second to respond. What do you mean POW is not found? Okay, there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and say, much better, great, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and say that we're all good there. So what's nice is after you run mix pow install, it actually generates pretty much all the docs you need right here in the terminal for you. So the first one we need to do is we need to open the config. So if we go to config, scroll this down just a little bit. It's nice because this will use your app name conventions and everything. So you can quite literally just go in and drop it in place. Oh, this pulled up the wrong config. This is the one we want. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and throw the config in here. Nice, we'll go ahead and do config. Perfect. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to, in the endpoint, we need to add this particular thing right here, right inside the endpoint. So the endpoint can be found within lib pow web, pow demo web, and then endpoint. So it's going to go right in the middle, right here. So we want it to be handled. So we want the plug session to be handled first, and then after that, Pow's plug session, it needs to go directly after this one, because it is dependent upon this being there as well. And then once we finish with that, then we have to update our router. So we can go ahead and go to the router. And from the router, we need to include the Pow Phoenix router up at the top. And then we need to include one scope. What this scope is this scope is particular for the Pow routes. Now, this is the first point that we really see evidence of Pow hiding things behind the scenes. Now, how I say that is kind of seems like it's a negative, but it's not necessarily a negative. It's nice if you don't want to see that stuff. If it's not anything you're planning on changing, then it's fine having it out of the way. Cool. So that is, crazy as it is, that is everything you need for the initial setup of Pow. So if we go ahead and run just to make sure, mix ecto, we're going to do reset because I don't recall if I already did a migrate or not. So what that did is that just dropped the database just to be sure, and then reran the migrations. And once we do that, now we can do mix phoenix.routes. This is going to show us all of the different routes. Now we can see that we have just this one and Pow routes. However, when we look at all the routes that have been generated, we can see that we have session routes based on different things and registration. And then I have Phoenix 1.5.1 installed right now. So I also have the live dashboard and everything set up. But that's not part of our demonstration. For today, we're just going to be looking at these. So we can go ahead, now that we see these, we can start mix phoenix.server. Oh, we need to install anything because I forgot to do that. This is just doing an npm install for all of the JavaScript stuff. And then we'll start up the server. Okay, now we have that. We can start up the server. Now I'm going to bring over my web page. Refresh, and we can see, ta-da, we have the traditional Phoenix framework page. However, if we come up here and we say we want to see the login page, go here. Here's the sign-in. Well, because this is new, we don't actually have anything to log in with. So let's go ahead and register. And that button will take us right to the registration. We can go ahead and do email, and we'll just do password. Now, one of the things that I was saying, my pull request initially was to ensure password strength. And Dan said that it should be left to the user. However, there are some requirements around password that we met right here. So this now takes us in. Now, we don't have anything protected, and this login doesn't do really much for us. However, we are logged in. So why don't we go ahead and quickly build a new route. So we can do git slash, actually, I lied. Need to do one other thing. We need to add a pipeline for the protected routes. I skipped that. So a new pipeline. This pipeline is called protected. And this ensures authentication. Go ahead and just create a new scope. And we can just go ahead and do protected. Oh, let's see. Pow demo web. And then right through. Do it. We can do protected controller. Okay, so we now have this route. However, it's not going to do much for us until we make the controller in view. So we're going to go ahead and do protected controller. And then we don't care too much. So we're just going to copy and paste this over and then make sure we change the protected. That should be good. And then we need to make a new view. And this one's going to be protected view. And we're just going to copy and paste. And then for the final, we're just going to in here, we'll go ahead and just do, we'll do an H1 and say, we are secure. So now, if I did everything right, which I really hope I did, we get an error. Maybe we just do this. Just double checking everything. Let's see, so then we do. What have I done wrong? any of you see it, feel free to call out.
I'm kind of looking, but still, I don't get it. Why endpoint terminated?
Yeah,
Did you restart the server?
I did. Let's go ahead and try this one more time. Oh, there we go.
Awesome.
Okay, so that is now protected. Now that we got through that, we can go ahead and we can log out. Let's see. I guess that won't log us out. To log us out, we're going to go here. Let's clean this up just a little bit. And then I'm going to cheat and just pull this part from another app from my tests earlier. And then we can come in here and inside here, remove all of this and add this. Make sure I'm using, so I called it secure in my other one. Path. And then if we pull back up, we should see we now have these and we can log out, which takes us right back to the sign-in page. We can log in. Go to our super secret page. Welcome to POW.
Nice. Good job.
Okay. The stress of live coding can be over. So as I said, POW is pretty easy to get going. Obviously, I hit some speed bumps, but that's just everyone's going to hit those. But it was pretty easy to get everything going. When you're needing to access anything when it comes to POW, what I kind of glanced over and skipped was you have access to this POW plug current user, and you just pass it your con, and this will always give you a definitive whether the user is authenticated or not. In my app that I was using live view on previous, I had a lot of pages, and it was really convenient being able to look up whether my user was a current user or not. So there's a plugin called Persistent Session, which will check how long the user's been logged in and everything, and compare that to, I believe it's based on 30 days. And there's various different things that you can do to have POW made better. One of them, which I've never actually played with myself, is called POW Ascension, if I recall correctly. And POW Ascension will give the users the ability to utilize POW, but to authenticate using Google or GitHub or a bunch of different extensions that they have curated. I don't know if that's the right word, but that they have made to work with POW. POW Ascent is the name of the library. This one is a totally separate library from POW, so this would have to be another dependencies to include. But it allows authentication through many different sources. POW has a growing and strong community behind it, and that's one reason why somebody may want to use POW to get off the ground quick and easy. That's kind of my presentation for the moment. I have a couple other things, but I'm curious if anybody has any questions or if they followed along and got stuck as well, and maybe we can help them through.
This is Alex. Just a quick question.
Yeah.
I noticed that you use the route helpers in that view, in that template rather, and you specified the method delete. How does that work? Is there some hidden JavaScript that just makes
yeah.
the...
Yeah, so this particular, so how to log out is it looks for a delete method. So here in my link, I am specifying the method is delete. So I'm just changing because this link tag boils down into an anchor, if I recall correctly. And it just changes the method of choice for the anchor to be delete instead of the traditional post, I believe is what it is.
Okay. It's just
yeah.
To send the delete HTTP delete request, there must be some JavaScript that magically injects the form submit with the delete or something.
So it's all HTML. I'm trying to remember if it is the anchor tag or if it's a different tag. But this is HTML actually gives you an attribute on it that allows you to specify the method. JavaScript there's no JavaScript included in this particular method. Yeah. So
thank you.
I can follow up with you on that one, on which tag it was in particular. I just don't recall off the top of my head.
Yeah. One comment, Jose wrote a blog post on their new consulting website, upcoming authentication solution.
Yes.
Do you know anything about it?
I do. And that is actually something that I was going to talk briefly about after comments and questions. Do we have any other comments or questions before we move on to that?
I was just noticing we do have some questions on the YouTube Live.
Yeah, I was just looking at that. Is it usable as just as a backend server or as a front-end library like React? So they actually, Pow does have an API. They do have documentation for how to use Pow in an API setting, so that way it does not utilize any of these templates. I've never personally utilized it, though I've seen a fair amount of comments and everything go through GitHub on how to use it, and it seems pretty in-depth. So yes, it should be easily used with React. Actually, I can't say easily because I've never used it, but knowing Pow, it's going to be fairly easy to get going with a front-end library like React. And first time using Elixir, looking at Elixir and starting to discover all these new libraries and languages. Juan, I started Elixir myself only a year and a half ago. And this was really my first backend language to learn. I've learned a handful since: Python, Java, C#. I've dabbled in all of those. And every single time I come back to Elixir, I genuinely just love Elixir. It's so easy to just grasp. At least in my mind, it is. Especially being that I'm primarily in my day job a front-end developer, so I don't get to play often with back-end. And I feel comfortable when I am coding in Elixir. Good to know. I'm doing a project where I use React for the front end and Elixir for the back end. Yeah, so Pow is pretty easy to use. Now I am going to start talking about what happened in between starting this presentation and from when I actually presented it. So when I was originally doing this presentation 2, 3, 4, long time ago, there was the options in the Elixir community were role authentication yourself, use Pow, or use another library that a number of people said is good, but not what I was looking for, so I never looked into it. So I can't speak too much on that one. But recently, Jose William, who is the author of the language Elixir, the founder, he currently works on the language. I don't know how else to describe Jose. He's one of the core contributors to Elixir and I think it's fair to say as well, Phoenix. He published an article. When was that? Just a month ago or so, a few weeks ago. Let me go ahead and bring it onto screen real quick for you guys. It's all talking about authentication systems in Phoenix, and he actually speaks of POW directly, and he calls POW a good solution. However, it has a couple pain points for himself. And what I found so interesting with this article was I had similar opinions when it comes to POW. As somebody who dislikes magic, someone who dislikes having things done behind the scenes, I want to be able to see what everything is going, what is going on with everything. And so when I started with POW, how I very first started was I did exactly what we did tonight, and then I just exposed every single file because I wanted to know the inner workings of POW. And I disliked how I had to do that on every new project, was to expose everything. And Jose shared a similar pain point. So he recently started talking about how with Phoenix and all the changes to Phoenix and all the changes to Elixir, things are being made very easy, but it's also being made easy to make mistakes. So he proposed making a new generator, which they're just calling the Phoenix Gen Auth, to solve this solution. And it's not meant to put POW out or to remove POW or take POW's place. It's intended to be another alternative for it. Now, I've actually pulled down the project, though it's in a very much so a beta state, and I've played with it a little bit. It's nice. The documentation is what you can expect for something that is in a 0.0.2 state. But I was able to reasonably set up an entire application. Now I can switch over to that and give a brief show and tell of that, if you guys are interested. Though I can't say I've studied it tons to know the inner workings. Is that something you'd want to see, Alex?
Sure, if you did some work, or at least if you can go over the concepts, like how is this generator different, what kind of stuff, what kind of code it generates. I'll be curious to see that.
I did want to add just a little bit to kind of flesh out that discussion, because, when this article came out, we were already still thinking about having the POW discussion, and I was like, oh no, does this like totally replace it? I'm also a panelist on the podcast Elixir Mix, and we recently interviewed someone who's doing things in the community, and when we were talking about POW as an ancillary topic. And one of the things that was really interesting is that he said, he prefers POW as a solution over the generator solution. And so that's like when I really realized that, there is a place for both, and some people are just going to prefer one over the other. And there are pros and cons to each. And Jose's like very forthcoming about that in his article, which is very admirable. Just acknowledging that one of the benefits of something like POW is how Evan was describing how you can expose the files that it's using. And at that point, it's no longer managed by POW, right? And that means that if a new version of POW comes out, I automatically, and I haven't exposed it, then I automatically kind of get those pages and things and those behaviors upgraded. And if I've done a generator, then I have to manage that myself, right? I have to like figure out, oh, now there's a different way to do it. So I may have, taken the generator and customized it for my purposes. And now if I were to regenerate it, I would see, oh, they were doing some different things now. So both are valid. So it's an interesting thing, so I don't know. What do you think about that, Evan?
It is kind of an interesting thing, because I don't want to say it's going to split the community, because I don't think it will. The Elixir community is pretty tight. but I'm interested to see how the two evolve with each other. Because I totally believe it that your friend or the guy you're interviewing prefers POW. I totally believe it. There are some things that make POW preferable. For somebody who just wants to get something up and going, it is what you should choose. And as much as I say everything is hidden, it's not difficult to expose things. And if the only thing you're looking to edit is the templates, he has one of the generators that exposes nothing but the templates to make it easy. So that way you don't have to fuss with all of the other things. So I think it's going to be fun and interesting to see how they grow with each other. Because I don't think one is going to replace the other. I definitely don't think that's going to happen.
Cool.
Alex, I'm looking through it, and I must have deleted my little project. So I don't have anything of the Phoenix Gen off. Though I'd be happy to do a lightning demonstration of it earlier or at a later time, because I spent a lot of time. How I learned Elixir was learning through developing an authentication system. Mark kind of, being that we worked together in the same building, same company, Mark and Brett really did a lot of help teaching me Elixir, and it was convenient being able to go home and tinker with things, and then I'd come into work and I could sit at their desk for 45 minutes asking them questions. And pretty much everything I learned was doing through an authentication system. So unfortunately, I don't know if it's unfortunate, I've built a little bit of a passion around authentication. The whole reason I actually started looking into Python was I was curious to know how do they handle it. Not because I wanted to learn Python, because I'm curious to see all the various patterns that exist through the different languages and their ecosystems, and to see what I can apply into Elixir. Because I've done a home roll, and I've done POW, and I'm now starting to play with this new library that's coming out. So I have a bit of experience in this area. Whether that be good or bad, I'll let the viewers decide.
Well, you certainly have developed some opinions, right?
I definitely have viewed some opinions. More than once, I came in and did nothing but rant to Mark and Brett about dumb things that were happening. That makes sense after they explained it, but from someone learning from scratch was not enjoyable.
So like it was interesting, like as Evan was on this journey, right, discovering authentication and the impacts of different decisions, and he was getting frustrated because it was liberating, it was constraining him in this way, and then so it was kind of fun just to sit and be a participant in his journey.
I'm sure it was a ride from your perspective. Every day was a new adventure.
and then one day you're like, that's it, I'm getting rid of POW.
Well, and the worst part is 2 weeks later, I'm like, I'm looking at POW again.
Exactly. And I was like, people need to hear this. People need to know that's normal. That's okay. And that it is a process. And like now as you're exploring, with the new Dash-bit generators, the ones that are going to be available, that'll be more information, more opinions to form.
Yeah.
So,
hopefully it boils down to something, because when I started working with Elixir and Phoenix, I felt like there wasn't a de facto easy just throw in kind of a solution. And when I started looking at POW, I saw there's a POW package, and then there's kind of a couple of plugin packages that you have to bring in and to get it going and get it set up. But then I read the book by Chris McCord, Programming Phoenix, where he builds the authentication system from ground up, and I followed it, and I kind of liked it, and I stuck with it because I understood it completely. Pow was like you said, Evan, felt like too much of magic, you know.
It was such an interesting thing, because one of the things that when I came in and talked to Mark was, after doing a home roll and then looking at Pow, my very first thought was, this doesn't feel like it fits in the Elixir community. It feels like it's against the grain. Was my very first thought. I've since revised that a little bit to not think to that extreme, but it felt like magic. It felt so much like magic, because so many people in the Elixir community, oh, you need that thing? Why use a library? Just do it yourself. It seems to be, and it's not a bad thing. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm just saying the community has such an opinion of, why don't you try building it yourself before relying on something else, which I think is good coming from the JavaScript world, where everything, oh, you need that? Just npm install it. And that, I feel like that's where JavaScript is starting to get a lot of haters, is because that is what everybody says. Oh, you need that library? Just install it. And then suddenly you realize, even with Babel and everything, your app is 16 megabytes, and and so it's a complete polar opposite of the JavaScript community, which is where I spend my every day. So Pow, I've had a bit of a roller coaster of emotion with it, and how I've concluded with it is, I likely, on my next app that I build, I'll likely build myself. I'll home roll it. However, I can say confidently, if somebody is needing an authentication system and they don't want to do everything, I am happy and firm in my answer of saying, go use Pow. It's a great library that the author is doing his absolute darndest to make sure is safe, secure, and easy to use. It's just not for me. And I feel like that's where the community is going to live, is it's either that's exactly for me or that's not for me. So it's kind of a fun thing to see. And that's why I'm so excited to see how the two grow together.
And one thing I think is worth considering, like, you've got this idea for an app, right? You're like, okay, I want to build this thing. It helps me manage game character data, or I've got an idea for a recipe builder, something, and you want to get started on the app. And it's the part of the app that interests you, it's the thing that actually drove you to create it in the first place, is what you want to get into. And then you're like, oh, well, I need to have users, and I need
yeah,
and I need to do login pages, and I need to forgot password, and I need to do all this stuff. And it's like, that is not part of your vision for what you were trying to create. You're just trying to validate an idea. Can I make something that does this?
Well, and the worst part is once you finish it, then you're bored of the idea and you're done. once you finish the authentication.
Right. Yeah, it's true. You might never go further with it, right? That's
you're burned out. So I shared a minute ago my GitLab repository for a Pow Auth demo. That one is not what we did tonight, but that one includes two of the extensions: the email password reset extension and the email confirmation extension. So I just wanted to show what an app looks like when you have those up and going. Now, a couple things are not included with that, so you're going to have to, like, for example, I deleted the prod secret files. You're going to have to do a little bit of setup with that to get the app going directly. But it should give you a good example of what to look at on an app that is, quote unquote, ready to develop for your ideas. So,
and one of the other things, I'm glad you've mentioned the whole library of things that are available, because like OAuth, right?
Yeah.
Log in with Google or Facebook or GitHub or something like that right there can be just like the only reason that might say, yeah, that's what I want to use this, because it gives me, I can leverage all of this
because of Pow Ascent. Exactly. Well, and if you saw, it's there's a surprising amount of things that you can use to log in with.
Yeah, I was gonna comment on that. If I was gonna reach for POW, I would definitely reach for it because of POW Ascent and the different providers I would need. I did run into some problems with POW Ascent with something called incremental authorization, where you might need to get more permissions for a user's profile as they progress through your app.
Oh yeah.
And I will comment about Dan, the creator of POW. He's really responsive and helpful. If
Super responsive.
hop into the POW Slack channel, he'll probably respond within an hour if you ask a question. So
the Maestro made a comment on YouTube. It's that GitLab link that I shared right above your comment. It's nothing special. It's just a GitLab link. And if that doesn't work, just let me know, and I'm happy to share a way to better share it.
Well, we can also, if there's any links that you would like to include, then we can put those in the updated video description.
Yeah, I'll get those sent over to you so you can add them.
Sweet. All right. Well, are there any other questions or comments that anyone wanted to make? All right. Well, thank you, Evan, for taking the time and working through the technical issues with us. Thank you for your patience. So thank you for sharing your experiences with POW. And we hope to have more of you with us next time, and we'll try and do a better job of making it a smoother experience. But thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Evan.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark.
thanks, Evan.
Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
And if you see this, thank you.
Thank you, Dan.